Hello and welcome to the second video in Operational Management for Level 3. Today we're going to look at Section 2, Implementing Operational Plans. Following on the previous video, we looked at SWOT and PESTLE analysis. If you remember, the main aim was how we measure and trying to ensure that our project will be successful. So let's have a look at the different actions that you should consider when implementing an operational plan. It's not just the objective, the budget and timescale. There are many aspects which I'm going to analyze in more depth. The first action is on page 15, the organization's overall objectives and targets. Here it gives you an example for different organizations and fields, but what I want you to consider is how specific and measurable are those objectives. For example, it's not just increasing sales and reducing landfill, but increasing sales by 20% over 2 years and reducing landfill waste by 40% over 5 years. So, an example within the NHS could be increasing online appointments, but not just that, make it specific and measurable. So increasing online appointments from, let's say, 50 to 70 by July. Actual action is timescales, which is not only concentrating on the deadline. Have a look at page 15. Obviously, the deadlines for the team objectives are essential. However, it's not only that. What about critical review points? You know, an operation plan is not just the finished product. Feedback and evaluation at the beginning and end of each stage to ensure the quality and that you're on the right track. Then the availability of the staff, for example, their work schedules, allocating enough time for new tasks. What about holidays booked and other commitments? Imagine has to do double work if they have to concentrate on their daily task as well as the new project. Time available for unexpected problems and delayed, as well as the amount of flexibility in timings, which is quite debatable. Some employees can be motivated if they know they could have more time to achieve their target. However, some others might get demotivated and say things like, "Oh, I know my manager will give me 1 more week to complete my project." Important action is the budget. It is important for managers to understand any budget that they have been allocated for implementing plans. They need to work with those responsible for making financial decisions so that everyone involved can work out and agree on the priorities. For instance, for the project, department, or organization. Agree on responsibilities, accountability, and limitations like budget, limits, and who to go if there are some problems. Make sure that a sufficient budget is agreed to cover all spending requirements, including accidents. Understand budget limits. Please remember that you don't want to overspend while implementing a new plan. Budgets are usually agreed and negotiated at the beginning of the planning and preparation stage of objectives, when a budget is signed off for each phase of a project, and whenever there are changes that require renegotiation. Then, let's have a look at physical resources on page 17. We have to plan and monitor the physical resources carefully to make sure that the items and buildings are fit. Resources can include buildings. On our previous example with increasing the appointment, is it realistic? Do you have rooms available? Which leads to furniture, fittings, equipment, and machinery. Do you have specific medical tools that are needed? Lighting, even basic resources like air conditioning or CCTV. And information technology, like do you have the relevant technology resources to support your new project? Then human resources. Human resources need to be planned carefully too. We need to work out a range of skills. What managers need to implement team and organizational plans could be, for example, members of the existing workforce, new recruits, consultants, volunteers, any member. And as we know, the team members, we need to have a wide range of skills, knowledge, and experience. When planning human resource for tasks, we have to evaluate whether our team is available, fully trained, and ready to be fully operational with no further input. Finally, setting smart targets for the team, which I have been mentioning it through the whole video. By working to agreed standards and aiming at deadlines, the leaders and manager can set targets and measure progress towards the team goals. So as we already seen, the targets need to be specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time-bound. So in our example with the appointments, if we take all the above into consideration, we would like to increase the appointments from 50 to 70. Okay, which is specific and measurable. However, is it achievable and realistic? Look at the elements that we've discussed above. Do you have the resources for 20 more appointments within a day? Do you have the rooms, the doctor, the nurses, receptionist, equipment? And finally, when is the deadline? Is it by June, July? As well as look at the things we mentioned at the timescales. As we have already seen, there are many factors that influence the operational plan. Therefore, you need to have a three-dimensional view of the task, the people, the resources, and the budget at their disposal so that they can allocate work in the most effective way to achieve the best results. Remember what we said before, when allocating work to others, you need to look at the task, defining and agreeing the objectives. What is going to be the human and physical resources needed, the deadlines, technical details and specification, the individual, its team member skills, knowledge and experience, their suitability and availability for the task, their career development needs, and finally, the team, sharing the work effectively and fairly, giving the right team members the right tasks and responsibilities. You need to allocate work on a fair basis and consider matching the task to the individual skills and capabilities involving all team members. You don't want to discriminate, which leads to ensuring equality and avoiding favoritism. Monitoring, controlling, and assessing performance. Once the work is underway, problems and changes almost unavoidably occur. For example, problems with the physical supplies, staff sickness or shortages, changes in a customer's order leading to amended objectives, changes in legislation, especially within 2019 and Brexit, staff finding the allocating work too easy or too difficult. Therefore, you need to monitor progress and adjust plans and the allocation of work as required. You need to align several elements when monitoring, controlling and assessing activities and performance, such as, for example, the agreed working standards. Everyone needs to be aware of the agreed standards so that the results can be measured against them. Performance indicators. There are some measurements that can show the achievement of the objectives. For example, the number of calls made, the value of sales made, or the amount of waste generated within a month. In our example, how many online appointments you have booked, how many referrals. And then we go to work schedules to show the work hours that have been used when achieving the objectives and any staff problems or changes. Quality control checks. For example, checking orders going out, checking the quality of items being produced, or in our case within the NHS, you can check customer satisfaction surveys or physical checks of supplies and waste. And finally, budgets, to see if the objectives are being met within the allocated budget. How plans are revised in response to changes in objectives. So when revising plans in response to changes in organizational objectives, you need to, for example, identify and analyze the changes, for example, the causes, the problems, and the possible solutions, negotiate and make appropriate revisions to the original plan, use good communication skills throughout to minimize the impact of revisions. So let's have a look in more depth. On page 23, you can look on the chart where it has reasons for changing plans on the left and the examples on the right. For instance, if the overall objectives, aims and priorities change,
That might happen as an organization decides to postpone buying new cars for staff and spend the money on new IT system instead. Our demand for product and services rise or fall. A new tablet sells out after a successful marketing launch, and the manufacturer needs to change its plans and budgets to increase production. Improvements in technology. Imagine how much video conferencing technology has improved the last few years, and staff do not even need to travel abroad for meetings so often. Estimations are found to be unrealistic. For example, in our own case, if you plan 110 meetings while your daily meetings are just 50, then you maybe are too unrealistic and you should adopt your plan to fit your initial plan. Once the potential changes has been identified and analyzed, then you have to refer back to the first steps when we analyze the timescales. For example, for new suppliers or staff, physical and human resources, you might need to decrease staffing levels if there is a long delay, or hiring new equipment to deal with the change requirements. And finally, budgets, negotiating overtime to finish extra work on time. The main point throughout the operational plan that you need to remember is to have good communication skills. To minimize the impact of revisions, you need to communicate well with all stakeholders who are affected by changes to the organizational objectives and plans. It can help to use a model when implementing change, such as ADKAR, which we will cover later in more detail. However, let's have a quick look. So ADKAR stands for awareness, desire, knowledge, ability, and reinforcement. Awareness. So what's happening? Why there is a need for change? Then desire. Do you have the desire to participate in the change? The knowledge. It's crucial to have the expertise and knowledge about how you're planning to change. And then ability. Do you actually have the ability to implement change? And finally, reinforcement to sustain the change.